All right. I promise this is the last time you'll have to hear me talk. So like my dentist says, this will only take a minute and you won't feel a thing. As early as the 4th century BC, it was recognized that water shapes human health. The connection between water quality and health goes back as far as 2,400 years. And while that idea hasn't changed, the way that we measure water quality has. In the 19th century, we used tools like the Secchi disc, and that first allowed us to quantify water for the first time. But today we're using satellites and network sensors to observe water quality in real time across entire regions. We've come a long way with water quality monitoring, but there's still important gaps to address. Public water systems do a great job at testing at the treatment plant, yet water can change as it moves through the water distribution system. Metals like lead can be introduced to the water, and things like disinfectant byproducts can continue to form over time. To really understand exposure, we need to measure water quality where people actually use that, and that is at the household tap. Another major gap is private wells. Unlike public water systems, private well water is not regulated, and most well owners don't even test their water routinely. Yet this is a large population, over 58 million people in the United States. And their drinking water can be vulnerable to a wide range of contaminants like pesticides, nitrates, and PFAS. So for many of these households, water quality is simply unknown. These gaps point to the need for monitoring approaches that are accessible, scalable, and analyzed at the point of use. Many households already use point-of-use filters. These systems quietly sit at the tap, interacting with every liter of water people consume. The question is can these devices be used as undercover agents? One advantage of this approach is that they will immediately protect the user from contaminants while they are waiting for the analysis and the results. The other thing is they naturally integrate water data over time. Instead of relying on a simple grab sample, they will actually provide a time-weighted average that reflects real use. This is important for contaminants like lead, which can actually spike depending on stagnation. And finally, these systems are already familiar to users. Therefore, the barrier to adoption would be quite low. So together, this makes point of filtration not just a treatment device, but a practical platform for exposure monitoring. Addressing water quality at the tap requires more than just one discipline. It requires backgrounds in chemistry, engineering, biology, business, public health, and community engagement. No part of our project works in isolation. Trusted Tap is organized around 4 tightly connected teams. One team advances the monitoring science, another focuses on communicating the results, the third evaluates the systems in real homes, while a fourth builds a path to long-term stability and commercialization. So our Objective 1 team has developed the methods to measure heavy metals, pesticides, and PFAS and disinfectant byproducts, and these methods have been demonstrated using 2 commercially available systems and translated into standard operating procedures to ensure consistent and scalable analysis. But reliable data is not enough. Once you have the results, the next challenge is making those results understandable. Objective 2, they focus on how Trusted Tap connects with people, the team that directly interacts with the public, and how users perceive water quality, what information they want, and how they prefer to receive it. Sorry, long day. These insights guide the design of the communication materials and accompany each testing kit, making the process intuitive and accessible. And after the analysis is complete, the team provides a report translating into actionable information. Objective 3, it focuses on the field testing and the deployment of Trusted Tap. Under real-world conditions, we begin with a smaller beta testing in the city of Chicago, but once validated, we will scale it up to a much larger population, including private wells. Objective 4 focuses on ensuring Trusted Tap can continue beyond the research phase. This team is developing a sustainability plan that will bring Trusted Tap into a viable service. So Trusted Tap brings water quality monitoring where the exposure actually happens, at the kitchen sink. By combining analytical methods, clear communication, real-world validation and a sustainability plan. We're building a system that people can trust and use. But remember, this is also a compelling business plan. If we have 23 million households on private wells, and we can tap into 1% of that population at $100 per sample, we've just created a $23 million market. Thank you very much.
Mine's nowhere near as fancy as his because, well, we just slapped this baby together. We're going to stand here so I can read from the screen. All right, so I have a Nebraska well owners, septic owners checklist, well and septic checklist that we use throughout Nebraska. So this is kind of what it looks like. It's a half sheet of paper, usually printed on cardstock, but it's an easy way for well and septic owners to be able to go through. We prefer and recommend in the spring and the fall to be able to check their systems and make sure they're in good shape. So the first thing we start off with is inspecting your wellhead and area around it in the spring and fall, and perform maintenance as necessary from whatever you end up finding through that inspection. First, we want them to make sure that the secure cap, the vent, and the electrical conduit are undamaged and secured. So damages, of course, in the springtime can happen during winter when snow plowing. In the summer and such, it can happen with a lawnmower running into it. Make sure that your wellhead is at least 12 inches above grade and the ground around it sloped away with no depressions where water can sit stagnant. Keep tree plantings away from your well and waterline locations. Everyone knows what tree roots can do. Check all hydrants and faucets and water pipes to make sure that none are leaking, busted, or from being run into or freezing up over the winter. Properly fix and replace anything damaged, and if necessary, for some things, have to be winterized in the fall. At the same time, we want them to check on their on-site system, so inspect that system. The same rules apply for both lateral systems and mound systems. First of all, we don't want any vehicles or other heavy objects kept from or stored on the drain field or septic tank. You keep those away. Animal confinement areas should not be located over the drain field or septic tank, and no sidewalks or buildings should be located over that drain field or septic tank. This does happen. Perennial grass cover is maintained. No trees or bushes should be planted over or near the drain field and or septic tank. You want to have, we always encourage 2 to 3 times a year, or every 2 to 3 years, for pumping a septic tank. But of course that depends on the size of the tank and then the number of occupants in the house. And they can work with a licensed, certified installer to be able to check into that. For lagoon systems, we do allow lagoons in Nebraska for wastewater. They're mostly located in the eastern portion of the state. A lot of them are in southeast Nebraska because we have heavy clay. So we have to keep a fence around that lagoon and keep that intact and maintained. We want to maintain a 2-foot minimum operating depth of wastewater at all times in the lagoon so that we keep those bacterial processes going. Keep the grass berm mowed, and no trees should grow on the berm or in the lagoon. Want to keep aquatic vegetation in the lagoon managed to allow good airflow and sunlight to reach that water surface so that we have the evaporative process happening. And then we want to be able to also inspect our water treatment systems, making sure that they're not leaking and that they're properly operating. Very important, as other talks have said, to review the recommended maintenance procedures and the filter media replacement for water equipment according to the manufacturer's specs. This includes water softeners, filtration systems, and water heaters should be drained annually. We want people to, at a minimum, test for nitrate and coliform bacteria annually at an accredited drinking water laboratory. And we have a few of them throughout the state, and this is the list of them. We give the phone numbers, the address, and then the analytes that they are accredited for by the Nebraska Public Health Environmental Lab that's located in Lincoln. We also want folks to be aware of other possible contaminants of concern in their area, and we want them to test for them, of course. Checking with their local NRD, which is Natural Resource District. We have 23 of them throughout the state. Health departments or nearby community water supplies can be a really good avenue or resource for this. And if anybody's in any doubt with issues, contact their licensed water well contractor or certified on-site wastewater professional to make necessary repairs or do more in-depth inspections. And that's my info.
Raise it up a little bit. Can you hear me? Mark, set, go. All right, thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit about what we're doing in Oklahoma. I'm Tim Probst with the Oklahoma Water Resources Center. I want to share a little bit about some stuff we're doing to map groundwater spatial trends using ArcGIS hotspot analysis. I'm not a specialist in ArcGIS, so bear with me. The backbone we do are these educational events. We offer free well water screening, and it gives us an opportunity to educate well owners. Also, one of the things we want to do at the same time is to see if there's any statewide trends. Toward that end, we've been using ArcGIS Pro, have a license through OSU. First thing we've been doing is geocode function, which transforms the sample addresses to coordinates on a map. That does consume credits, just FYI. So we develop a map. There's a OSU located there, our sample locations across the state last couple of years. And then this allows us to then assign, here's the nitrates results, assign test results to a specific location. Then been using the optimized hotspot analysis tool that calculates the GI star statistic, which evaluates spatial clusters to trying to figure out if high or low groups of numbers are random or if there's something to it. And so it comes up with this kind of red is hot or high, blue is cold or low groups or spatial clusters around the state. You see there's specific locations. Notice that the red means it's relative. That's not like an MCL has been exceeded. So the next step with this is to use a summarize within tool. So that connects a sample location to a layer in a feature layer and within a boundary. So it can group data within a boundary on a feature layer and provide some basic stats about it. So for instance, here's the nitrate data. I overlay the county map, and then within the counties, I'm able to calculate a mean for that particular county. Then I take that and put that into the hotspot analysis tool. So we're able to identify specific counties maybe we can target. That's an extension agent's dream. We got 2 counties in the whole state, right? The problem is, though, there's a lot of blanks in what we've got. So realized we needed some more data, and I reached out to the Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality and utilized some of their public water supply compliance data. They gave me about 10 years worth of data for their groundwater source public water supplies. You see there it's about 10,000 samples from over 1,200 sites. Basically same analysis then on the public water supply locations, the hotspot analysis there. Across the western part of the state, you see the hotspots, and there's the counties again. Now, got a much bigger job now because we've got half the state. But we started looking at that, okay, is there a way within that we could narrow that scope down, help us to prioritize, and maybe even tie it to some hydrologic functions rather than the counties themselves? So the Oklahoma Water Resources Board has an aquifer map. So then we tied all the samples to the aquifers and ran the hotspot analysis. Still a pretty broad, scope to look at. So then we tried some other things. The next step I took with HUC 10 watersheds, which enabled us to identify, there's specific watersheds we could work with for education or additional testing. At this point, kind of the takeaways of what we've learned, the big part of this is the proof of concept. And I think if we have a map, we can look at the hotspots for the map. We can look at ecoregions or MLRAs or irrigation district. If there's a map, we can use the hotspots. The second thing for us is the usefulness for the public water supply data to fill in some of the gaps for the limited data we have, identify statewide trends, and in particular looking at contaminants of concern that we've not been able to test for. We can identify maybe arsenic or lead spots within the state. And then the third follows directly from that. It's a new tool. Let's see if we can utilize this to help prioritize, raise awareness, and even maybe some collaboration with our neighbors. Watersheds cross state boundaries. We can go to specific watersheds to work on it. Next step's the big one. To be honest, I'm just learning on this. So I want to review this methodology, make sure it's being utilized correctly. One of the reasons I wanted to share today was if there's experts out there, I'd appreciate some feedback. Would like to refine the workflow and then start adding more data. I only have the nitrate data from ODEQ, so some other analytes from them. We've got more data we need to add, and we're actively writing proposals to get more money. Speaking of money, this was funded by a NIFA grant from Rural Health and Safety Education. Across the top are our partners on that project, and then below our associations for our O1 team. Thank you so much.
TAP score is like a grab sample still. And also, oh, hey, cool, thank you, sir. Where was I? Oh, TAP score is like a grab sample, but ours is already using these point of filtration devices that you can buy in the store. And what happens is if you use those, it integrates. So it's going to give you a time-weighted average of water as opposed to just a single grab sample. Does that make sense? So you get much more information. Because a grab sample can miss a lot of things, contaminants can vary over time and so on. And actually we can even get even more sensitive because of that integration. Cool? What was that? You're pulling off a filter. Yes, you're pulling off a filter. Thank you. Steve said it elegantly. Come on. Nothing? Oh. Oh. Oh, by standard methods right now, and that's how we're starting, is the gold standard. But later we will definitely look into like sensor type technologies. All you.
As far as distributing the well owner's checklist, every time I talk to a citizen, I email it to them. And then we also have them available at extension offices and big events like Husker Harvest Days, which is the largest working farm show in the world. As far as farm shows go. And then at Earth Wellness festivals and that kind of thing, that's how we generally push it out, so.
Yeah, we've got the license through OSU, so I used the Esri function through ArcGIS, plugged it in. It does cost credits to your personal account, but like for what I had, it was I don't know, whatever it was, 900 samples, and then I think it was 300 credit. Don't quote me, but it wasn't that much. I was pleasantly surprised because I thought it was going to ruin my whole account, but no, it didn't take that much out of it. So, but yeah, I did use the Esri one.
All right, thank you to John, Becky, and Tim. So the next session, we have 3 new presenters coming up. Adam Siegler with Montana State University, discussing evolution over 20 years in Montana well testing program. Justin Davis with Missouri Geological Survey, Missouri's all-in-one well information application. And Jeff Sadler, Oklahoma State University, Oklahoma Get Well Informed events, an efficient sample collection approach for rural areas.
see. Is that coming through? Okay. All right, let's hit it. I'm from 3 hours east over in Bozeman, and at the university I do teach and do research. I do research on private wells, also on citizen science surface water monitoring, but the biggest part of my research is actually on ag water topics these days. But in my outreach, the third of Montana's population on private wells is a big part of who I work with. And in 2005, when I started at Montana State University under my predecessor, I started the Well Educated program to educate owners about the suitability of their water for use, but also centralize that data to be able to help educate people. So we have over 40 partners across the state, and our approach is to partner with a private lab. We send out test kits to the county partners. Well owners stop in, pick up kits, send the samples and payment to the lab. We send them their results with the lab report, and we get a comma-separated value file from the lab. And I wrote a few R scripts some years back where we get individualized interpretations that we send out to them as well. So from the beginning, I've wanted to be able to centralize the data, so I built an access database back in 2005. Later realized there were some problems with that, building a database self-taught. But over time, I got some data science training, and in 2014 really refined that to get to a place where now we have a pretty robust data workflow. I apparently, based on this cartoon sequence, figured out I needed to use a computer for the first time in 2014. But actually, this compilation of all of the data has allowed us to do some things that Dr. Mari Eggers pointed to in her talk yesterday, where if you click on a county on our website, you can bring up a summary of the results for that county. You click on the bottom left there, and it will show the results for the Well Educated program, where the length of these red bars show you the percent of samples that were in a problematic range for that analyte, and the things that were most problematic are at the top of the list. Orange are the statewide results for comparison, and the number of samples tested there are listed. Some things we don't have any tests for. So we were excited last year when that paper with Mari was published that we could work to translate that into a summary of what to test for every watershed across the state. And Mari talked about that cumulative risk approach. So Well Educated is constantly rolling. We work with a private lab that is certified, and our follow-up is ad hoc, but we love learning from our counterparts in other states. And so I've been known Aaron for a long time and had a lot of respect for the Virginia program, and have been working to emulate some of those things the last few years. Learned about Stevens Point program just last year at the National Water Monitoring Conference, and learned today that they do the public presentations as well, which this is pictured us doing our first of those with Dr. Eggers speaking at an event a few years ago. We did some social science work around this, which is about to be published in the Journal of Extension also. So that first pilot was with analyzing at a private lab. The last three, results for the fourth of which just went out yesterday, analyzed all those samples on campus, wrote the R scripts to ingest the results from 3 different testing labs on campus to make these results that we send out to participants, and have started hiring little cohorts of students to help process larger batches of samples so we can think about how we can try to scale this up, to try and make this programming sustainable with very limited resources, a story we're all familiar with. And so this is the representation of the chaos that ensues to do all this work that you all know very well when you're trying to collect samples from the public, get them analyzed. And the details in this Gemini-produced graphic are not what I would like. My students do a much better job at that, and I need to learn from them how to do prompts. But so everything that we've talked about really is around human drinking water, but Montana is a very rural state, and in a lot, especially of eastern Montana, people are more concerned with the health of their livestock and the suitability of their water to grow crops than they are perhaps with human health. So Montana's a headwater state. We send water to 3 different oceans, and the quality of that water across the state is wildly different. That white stuff on the mountains in the western part of the state is snow. The white stuff in the picture on eastern Montana is salt. And we have portions of, we have a lot of groundwater in eastern Montana that is not suitable for use, and we lose livestock to mortality many years. So by having expanded the repertoire of our testing interpretation to cover livestock and irrigation, we get into communities. I get invited to go give talks in those communities that otherwise I would not get invited into, and then can bring up the human health aspects there too.
I'm Jeff Sadler. I'm from Oklahoma State University, and I wanted to share just an approach that we've used to gather a lot of samples from a rural area. So this is the state of Oklahoma at nighttime. The two big yellow patches are Oklahoma City and Tulsa. I've heard a lot of people say that you're from a rural state. We're from a rural state. So this is our study area. This is southeast Oklahoma, and it's about a 2.5 to 3 hour drive from our campus up in Stillwater, which is just north of Oklahoma City. And part of the reason we selected this area is because it's very rural. If we zoom into that here in a second, you'll see that there aren't a lot of lights there at night. The biggest one, which is kind of right in the middle, is McAllister, Oklahoma. Has anyone been to McAllister? Oh, yeah? Are you serious? Oh, I was not expecting that. That's awesome. So that's where our central location for our events has been. We did several events where we go to the counties. We do our events, and then we bring back the samples to Stillwater. Here's the population of this area and the population density. You'll see the lowest number there is 8. That's 8 people per square mile in Pushmataha County, Oklahoma. So if you compare that to Oklahoma County, which is 1,149, so it's a really big difference. We did several events where we went to individual counties and collected samples there and did educational events, and we got numbers like 12, 8, 14, 14, 8 samples. And because of that, it was just a very inefficient use of our time. And so we decided that we wanted to try a different approach, especially as this is a 2.5 hour drive to one of these locations than if we kind of did an all-day event to go to several. So our new model is, we call these Get Well Informed events, our own patented pun. Yeah. So what we do is we set up a day, the drop-off locations, of which we had, I think, 14. We had a drop-off time from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., and then those drop-off locations had to bring them to the central location, McAllister, Oklahoma, by 1 p.m. We would pick up the samples at 1 p.m. there, and then drive the samples back to Stillwater and do the test. Now, we test very basic parameters, E. coli, nitrates, pH, and TDS. And then we turn around and email out or mail out the results to these folks. And then after the results are out, then we do a follow-up Zoom meeting. Since it's so far away, it's a little bit hard to do it in person, and since everyone's distributed. So here's an example of one of our flyers. We have some instructions about sampling. Each county gets their own version of that, and the 2 years we've done that have been quite successful. The first year we had 136 samples on one day, and then the next we had 180. You can see those are our samples laid out in the lab, ready to start the process of getting them into the bacteria vessels. And then, like I said, we do a Zoom follow-up. Now, this hasn't been as successful as we'd hoped, Lots of times people have, maybe there's internet connectivity, we haven't figured that out. One of the things that we want to improve is to systematize the user input collection. We tried to get that out to all our county extension agents, but there was some breakdown in communication, and so there was like a version for every county, and so we were having to kind of get all of those together, and that was kind of a pain. So this is my contact information, and I appreciate your time.
These are tough acts to follow. Good job, guys. Ready? All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Justin Davis. I lead the Missouri Geological Survey's well installation section. And real quick, I'd like to show you a little bit about an application that we recently developed. Before I do, though, let me introduce MGS. We are a division within Missouri's Department of Natural Resources. We were founded in 1853, and we have the bragging rights of being the first state agency dedicated to studying and stewarding Missouri's natural resources. So something kind of cool there. A little bit about my team. We oversee Missouri's well installation requirements. That means we cover and regulate water wells, monitoring wells, geothermal, mineral exploration wells, and oil and gas wells. And we also license Missouri's well drillers and pump installers. So in 2019, we created the well installation section drilling information map. I know that's a mouthful, so we use the acronym WISDOM. It's a publicly accessible mapping application. We use it to host statewide well construction records and well drilling requirements throughout Missouri. It's available 24/7 to the public, well owners, drillers, environmental consultants, realtors, anyone really who has an interest in it. So when the first thing that a user sees when they log into this app is our drill areas. These you can click on each one to see construction requirements in its respective area, and they're all based on regional geology and aquifer conditions. Just a few examples here. Basically just shows construction requirements around our major lakes and also our contaminated areas where aquifer separation is critical. You can see site-specific casing depths on those examples that were just on that slide. Okay, the next thing I want to point out is the layer list on the left. You can select between well types, among other data. There's also a search bar that's really handy for address searches, lat long, or locational landmarks. If you zoom in just a little bit, you can see well locations. These are well records that go back as far as 1987 from when we began collecting them. And you can click each one to see construction information like this, scans of the original well records, geologic logs, and other useful information. So, awkward pause here because I didn't time this quite right. A few other features about this. Every mapping application like this seems to have a measurement tool. This is really handy if you're siting prospective well locations or if you're looking to evaluate or estimate setback distances, things like that. And then I think the last feature I wanted to tell you about was a radius search. So if you're interested in knowing how many or the type of wells in a certain area, you can pick on a location and see that respective well data. Okay, that's about all I wanted to show you on the application. That's really just scratching the surface of what the program can do, but let me know what you think. I welcome your suggestions, your ideas. My email address is on the slide, or put questions in the Slido at the end of this. Steve and your team, great job. This has been an awesome conference. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure to be here, so thank you all very much.
Good question. I didn't cover that as much as I could have. So we have a slew of different things. There's a lot of social media that the Water Resources Center does. They, the county extension agents, they're allowed, we give them a whole packet of materials, so social media graphics, we give them a press release. We give them print flyers, and we just let them pretty much do the advertising as they see fit, whatever works best for their county. Something that's interesting, which I would not have guessed before this project, is it's very effective to put it in the newspaper, the printed newspaper in these areas. And it's like, number one is Facebook, and then very close behind is newspaper. And I didn't even know newspapers were printed anymore. Like, that's not a good admission, but I was a paper boy growing up, so I don't know if there were any. Yeah, but anyway, so I hope that answers the question. Okay, this is something that we don't do, and this is a limitation, right? And I think there's a trade-off here, because if we try to get everyone the standard sample bottles, that's like a very big administrative burden. And so what we said is, please get a new plastic water bottle from the gas station or Walmart or whatever, like 500 milliliters, empty it, rinse it out several times with your tap water, and fill it up, right? We're not a certified lab. We don't have very prescriptive sampling instructions, which I could probably get stoned for here. And you would be surprised at what people like give us, right? Like empty milk jugs, Powerade bottles, which tested very high for TDS, by the way. Like I've seen everything. So we saw like the latest one I saw was a breast milk bag. So I don't know, like, anyway, yeah. So I think, if so you pay for it, you got to pay for it one way or the other, right? You pay for it up front and get everyone the standard kit, or you pay for it on the back end when people give you breast milk bags.
Sorry. Can you hear me better now? Does Wisdom have a bulk data export feature for public use? Yes, it does. I just didn't have time to show you. If you want to, it's a mobile-friendly device, so if you want to, come catch me after the presentation and I can show you.
Okay, yes, this is another thing we're running into, is this is a very rural area, not a lot of internet connectivity, not a lot of technology literacy, and so we haven't figured it out, I'll be honest. I think one option, and this actually happened this past time, is one of the county extension agents had like a watch party at their office, because they know how to use Zoom, they have internet, and so I think that might be something we encourage. But it's also like when like what day, what time of day works for people. People don't want to come in the evening, but they work during the day, so it's hard to win.
This jumping around of questions, it's so exciting. You're like, where's it going to go? Adam, could you talk a little bit more about your approach using irrigated ag to reach communities? Were you able to also test drinking water during those events, or were these just focused on outreach and education? So when I released the livestock water quality suitability mock guide, I got invitations to go to a series of Eastern Montana communities, and in each of those talks, I focused on the livestock question, but I presented on the human drinking water concerns in those areas and took well test kits with me for drinking water, and people picked those up too. So yeah, they are focused on the bottom line, but when you meet them where they are with the things that they're thinking about a lot and then make testing easy, I've found that it does work. And similarly, I just in the last couple of months released an irrigated water quality suitability, and this is a big issue, salinity and sodicity in eastern Montana. And similarly, people were really focused on that content, but again, same approach, brought the human health drinking water test kits along, and people picked a lot of those up.
In Oklahoma, we do, okay, so do we have specialized outreach in Native American areas that may be underserved? In Oklahoma, we have, I should know the number of this, but many federally recognized tribes. And many of those are sovereign nations, right? And so the big ones have their own environmental, in fact, we have someone from the Cherokee Nation here already. Oh, thank you, yeah. You should, and they have their own, and like you have a lab, right, in your own? Yeah, and so they can do their own testing, and they don't need us, basically. Now, some of the smaller tribes don't have that, and some have reached out to us to events in their tribe, and we've done those. Both times, the turnout was very small, and I don't know the reason for that. For everything I've heard is it takes a lot of time to build trust, and so maybe that was part of it. So we're definitely open to it, and there's a lot of room for growth there.
Okay, so do drillers have access to wisdom? Could they upload the wells that they completed in an area to help keep it up to date? Yes, and no, at least not in wisdom. So yeah, anybody can access the application, but it's an export-only, information-only app. We have a separate online application that drillers can use to submit well records, and by law, they actually have to within 60 days in Missouri. So the good news is there's a nightly connection between the two systems, so it's updated in almost real time.
What guidance is given to participants to ensure that the bottles used by participants are not cross-contaminated when it comes to bacteria testing? Okay, I'm not sure I totally understand this question. If it's about cross-contamination with other well owners' bottles, yeah, I guess I'm not sure what the question is, but did someone but anyway, I would be open, like you saw what we did, and so maybe this is the wrong way to do it. We just line them up, and we try to take whatever like reasonable precautions to, do one at a time. But there may be a better way to do that, and if someone has feedback about that, I would love to hear it.
That's a good question, Steve. How does septic and other sources affect well construction near Lake of the Ozarks? In parentheses, lots of wells and septics. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I like that question. Teasing. So Lake of the Ozarks especially has a tremendous amount of small properties surrounding the lake, and we constantly get into conflict with setback distance problems. Usually the lot sizes are small enough that they don't take our setback distances into consideration. So that puts us in variance territory. That puts us in the awkward conversation of, should you really be putting a well here? Is this your only option? That kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a challenge.
Have you published water quality standards for other types of livestock besides cattle? So the last time I took a deep dive on this, the information on standards for livestock are kind of all over the place and a little bit hard to tie down. And so some of the standards for just general salinity talk about different kinds of livestock and poultry, but the biggest issue that we have in Montana is sulfate killing cattle, and so that's what that was really focused on, and even that is difficult because there's a lot of variability in the sensitivity of different animals to different levels of the contaminants. So the only things we really covered in that water quality guide are salinity, sulfate, nitrate, and then some information about cyanobacteria, because the harmful algal blooms in stock ponds are a pretty big issue in a lot of Montana too. So a very little bit.
No, I think that's a good question, though. Something to think about. I know in Oklahoma, not just water wells, but a lot of orphaned oil and gas wells are a big problem. So that's a good idea. Thank you for whoever suggested that. That's my answer.
We have general guidance. When people participate in Well Educated, we ask them about whether they have any abandoned wells on their property and have general guidance on properly abandoning wells because they pose a risk to groundwater. So I think that's the closest thing we do to addressing that question.
Yeah, I would second that. Missouri pays real close attention to abandoned wells. We don't publish them in applications like Wisdom, mostly because if we know they're there, we're working to get them plugged. So.
Thank you.
All right, 6 more to go. Next 3 up, we've got JoJo Yeager from Auburn University, Department of Geoscience, Private Well Research Coordination Network, Strengthening Transdisciplinary Collaboration to Improve Health. And then Aaron Ling with Virginia Tech, Cooperative Extension, Keeping Your Cool, Challenging Conversations with Concerned Clients. And lastly, David Heinrich, Bergeson Caswell, Getting the Most Out of Your Water Well Professionals. Just give them a thumbs up when you're ready and they'll get us started.
All right, I'm ready. All right, so my name's JoJo Jager, and I'm a PhD student at Auburn University. My advisor at Auburn is Dr. Ann Ojeda, and she's the PI for the Private Well Research Coordination Network that we host out of Auburn. So today I'm going to give a little overview of the network. So when we think about the problems and research questions associated with well stewardship and water security, we can all acknowledge that these are very complex problems, and they sit at the intersections of environment, society, and policy. We think about how perceptions of risk dictate management behaviors. We can think about how the location and construction of wells impacts contamination, and how state policy can impact management approaches. So because of these complexities, interdisciplinary approaches are needed to understand these the connections between these factors. So this need for interdisciplinary collaboration is the root of the Private Well RCN. And to facilitate these collaborations, we wanted to build a community of scientists to gather information across disciplines and expertise across disciplines, and to generate avenues for collaboration by sharing interdisciplinary knowledge, being able to share expertise across, those researching wells, those who are stakeholders in wells, things like that, and strengthen cross-cutting relationships to approach research projects, integrating different types of scientists and program experts. So a little bit more about the RCN. It's NSF funded, and it's in its 2nd year of existence. It started in 2024. These are gonna advance, so just give it a second. It's a little coffee break. Okay, so we're funded through the NSF Climate Change and Human Health solicitation within the Geoscience Directorate, and we're comprised of geoscientists, engineers, extension and outreach experts, social science scientists, and then the last one, health scientists, yes. So we're currently engaging 85 network participants across 53 institutions in the US and Canada, and we're still growing. Hopefully after today, we'll grow even more, maybe 86, 87 network participants, but so the goal in these first 2 years has been to formalize the network, increase network visibility, increase the understanding within the network of the availability of funding, job opportunities, and increase partnerships within the network, as well as student opportunities for research. So we have a website and resource portal, geohealthconnect.com. Here we have information on our upcoming events. We have 8-week Zoom meetings that we have to talk about different topics. The most recent one was related to some funding that we were able to give out to foster collaboration between institutions to some researchers. So that's something we also are offering in the network, is a little bit of travel funding so that you can get to other institutions and collaborate. We've achieved these goals, these first 2-year goals, through member recruitment, the network has nearly doubled in size. This is where you can sign up if you want to join the network. This is the QR code, but it's on that website if you go to the, I believe it's the About page. But yeah, we've increased the diversity of members. We have job postings on the website, funding updates regularly. And I know that for me personally, I've been able to meet collaborators. I have one sitting next to me that I met through the Collaboration Network, and actually that's why I'm here today, is because I found out about it through her. And yeah, so the pitch of this is that I think you should all join the network, if that's not clear. But yeah, so this is the QR code, and the goals moving forward are increased research on water security, well stewardship, and health outcomes, continue membership increase and diversification, and to increase research action through well user education on well stewardship, practice, and policy recommendations through research projects. That's all I've got. Thank you so much. And my email is there if you have any questions for me or want any more information. I'll also be around tomorrow and tonight. Thank you.
All right, I'm just here with JoJo. Hi. All right, I'm ready. So I'm here to talk about how to keep your sanity and your humanity while working with humans. So has anyone ever had a day that was just really people-y? Yeah. So I'm going to talk about a range of different experiences, and I think many of you will nod your heads. You've been there before. So we find ourselves in many different roles in these jobs. We are in the service industry, whether we like it or not. Sometimes we're a problem solver, sometimes an expert advisor or an information source, sometimes directory assistants, and sometimes we're just a kind ear. So we hear lots of questions every day. We don't always know that these questions are rational, and we don't always have the answers to help people with the questions that they have. So we start from this point. I love me some Erin Brockovich, and I certainly love me some Julia Roberts, but stories like this have put into the minds of the public what a straightforward answer it is to find out what's going on with your water and whether it's making your dog sick or your water taste or smell weird or whatever else happens. And so that's kind of what we're dealing with. It's not always a straight line from source to analysis to solution. And so many more times we are dealing with that very zigzaggy way of reality. So underneath many people's concerns are all of these other things. So we have uncertainty, confusion, lack of understanding, a lot of times misinformation, fear, or shame. And that's, I think, where we need to start with when we pause and take a deep breath and remember that that's what people are bringing to us. And the best thing we can show them is some compassion and some patience and a kind ear. So I'm going to ask you all to uncross your legs, put your feet flat on the floor, and just practice noticing your breath. I'm also a yoga teacher. So if you notice that you're holding tension, you can work on lengthening your exhale. And that does not sound like this. It's a much more quiet, nuanced thing, right? So focusing on our breath and then allowing space and silence. I'm also a facilitator. So when I can find space in a conversation to let someone kind of wear themselves out with what they've read in the news about PFAS, and by the way, the Trump administration just got rid of all the PFAS regulations 1 hour ago, we might need a little breath and a little space to figure out what we do next about that. As much as possible without taking responsibility for what the customer or the client needs from you, and I am extension, so I think of everyone as a client, this is what we hear sometimes. So this is an actual voicemail message from a very concerned woman. You can see the highlighted parts. This is bordering on delusion. So I've actually stepped into this realm of working with people because of my entomology friends at Virginia Tech who deal with delusional infestation. So people who think they have bugs on them or in them that are affecting their lives. Okay, so sometimes we go all the way over into that realm. We have to be conscientious and careful with those people too. This is a bottle of water that a resident of Carroll County, Virginia, had been talked into starting to bottle for a woman who was selling it for medical purposes. He asked me if I could test the water for love and gratitude. I found out later that he was schizophrenic, and I had to meet him with just as much patience and kindness and space, as I would with anyone else. Well, we all know what this means, don't we? So this is my now good friend Karen, who tested her water for the first time. They moved to a rural area. It was so pastoral and beautiful, and they got sick once in a while, but they didn't think anything of it. And then they tested water, found E. coli. You can see one picture is of a mouse nest at the top of their well, and at the bottom is the downhole camera picture of what was at the bottom of the well. Let's just say the mice were losing some friends and relatives now and then. And effectively, those people had been drinking mouse soup for a period of time. So that was a period where this woman was calling me almost every day, almost in hysteria. They moved into a hotel. They were completely beside themselves. Happy story, they were able to bail out the well, completely repair it, and got 15 clear bacteria tests with us. So when you're in these moments, put your feet on the floor, find moments for a breath and a little space, and I'm so glad my animation is working. There are some lovely GIFs out there to help you remind you how to breathe. You can just put this on your screen when you're on the phone sometimes and remind yourself to take a breath, and the person on the phone will find a space to take a breath as well. Thank you.
Who has time to take a breath? All right. Fire in the hole. Okay, so instead of, this is kind of an interesting pitch that Katie sent over, and I thought maybe instead of 30 years of the highs and lows of working with my regulators, maybe I'd think about an approach that you could take to try to enhance relationships with the water well contractors you work with. Because private wells, doing them well, it is a team sport. And so the team, contractors, engineers, manufacturers, suppliers, regulators, health officials, sanitarians, I know where 4 of those groups get together every year to compare notes and get better at what they do. So it'd be great to see more folks like Wilson at the NGWA conference every year integrating with all those folks, but with the rest of the team. And so when we think about this team, there's a few types out there. You've got highly functional teams, which take a collaborative problem-solving approach. It means that we get everybody into the room, we understand each other, we try to come up with some really intuitive and collaborative problem-solving approaches to bring everybody together. We make decisions collectively, help understand each other to make sure that the decisions are agreed upon so that people can understand what their role is in that decision, in that outcome from whatever you're trying to solve. And that helps build these shared goals, right? And so when you have shared goals that you've built with the people you're working with, they have an internal drive to help succeed to that end. And so those shared goals are a big part of also getting people to be accountable for their parts in that process. Because if it's your process, it's your process. If it's our process, well, I've got some responsibility to make sure I did my part that I agreed to. So that comes together. And then, of course, highly functional teams, they can achieve well beyond individual capabilities. So we leverage each other's strengths and cover up each other's weaknesses and bring together a much better project. So on the other side of that, dysfunctional teams. Dysfunctional teams have an absence of trust. If we don't understand people's motivations, why people are trying to get us to do things that we don't understand why we're doing them, it builds a lot of what's in the back of people's minds. There's a fear of conflict. If you haven't built those good relationships with people, you may not get to hear the whole story. And when you're working with a group of people that's generally working on things hundreds of feet under your feet, you want them to be open and honest with you as possible. So make sure you've got that openness to have those conflicts. There's a lack of commitment. Teams that don't work well together aren't committed to the same goals, aren't committed to each other. And in the well industry, when you have multi-generational families and companies, commitment's a big deal. And a lot of families have dedicated generations to doing what well contractors do. And sharing that level of commitment is important. Avoidance of accountability. Again, if you don't know what the repercussions are, people try to avoid taking accountability because they don't want to deal with the potential outcomes of giving you bad news, and inattention to results. Dysfunctional teams have a tendency not to recognize the results that are in front of them, take things for granted as normal, and don't recognize the really good efforts, even if they do happen on a day-to-day basis. So I'll ask you a question. which team are you on? What best resembles the situation you're working in a day-to-day basis? So the water well contracting industry is very much a person-to-person industry. So improved relationships will improve your team, will improve your results. So work to understand each other. Really try to think about what's going on in your well contractor's life and help them understand what's going on in your lives, because it's not like you don't have a full plate of things to consider as well. So understanding each other is a big deal. Our industry is still shrinking, so contractors there's still the same amount of people that need water supplied to them, less people to do the work. So it's increasing workload, making more time stresses. Trying to understand that when you're working with people in the industry is really important. Recognizing each other. The things that well contractors figure out how to do on a day-to-day basis is not easy. The fact that we talk about the number of people that are getting water from private water supplies, and the fact that by and large our societies are pretty healthy, is something that's worth recognizing. So take a moment to recognize the successes. Share the same commitment level. Again, like I said, generations of time put into the effort. So the industry is committed. Make sure you're sharing that same commitment level, because if you're not, people will have a tough time taking you seriously. Be consistent. Just make sure you're predictable with the outcomes. Be consistent with interpretations of what we're trying to do. And of course, be an encourager. It's really easy to tell people what not to do. It's much more harder to think about the situation, instruct people on a better way to accomplish the goals we're trying to pull off together. And again, remember, we are in this together. We are all part of a network that's trying to deliver a really good product. And working together is really the only way we're going to do it. So trying to figure out how you build that team, be a part of that team, is really, really important. It will yield better benefits for well owners and for you down the road, because the relationships you make, they'll last a lifetime, right to the end of your career. And to that end, though, I do want to share one thing, because I'm thinking we have, in Minnesota, we have had a bunch of inspectors that have retired and are retiring, in fact, including one of my inspectors. So if anybody wants to know the how-to, that just, Doug's going to be retired here, Doug Edson with the Department of Health. Exceptional inspector, and really the kind of person that can just tell me what to do. And I trust that he's telling me to do the right things for the right reasons. And so it's really, maybe you can get Doug to come in, get his fishing hat off and come and talk to the group on the next conference, Steve. But no, it just, the amount of time and effort he put into educating the people he worked with garnered just a wide network of people that work well with him. And so he's got the ability to work in and out of problems very, very easily. And it's really a pretty, well, it's going to be a sad day when he retires in June, put it that way. Thank you.
Okay. How do you scale the approach of thoughtful and patient response? I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all to this. I think a lot of times at the beginning of a conversation, most of my conversations with clients are over the phone, and so that gives me a little bit of space in itself. Normally, I kind of let them go for a little while, and sometimes I'll even multitask, and be paying attention, but also, working on something else. And at some point, I just will say, this is what I can offer you help with today. And I'm very clear about what I can and can't offer. So that's usually my best approach. And the second question looks like it's for me as well. What do you use as your metrics to separate signal from noise? I think I try to categorize what someone is saying into kind of my wheelhouse or not. And so I try to ask clarifying questions whenever possible. I come back to questions about testing, to questions about what avenues that they've tried so far, just to get them back on track. I find a lot of times people, I think about this as practice too, so I don't take each conversation so personally. So I kind of see it as like a training event when it's a really challenging conversation, and that helps me keep a little distance too. But I will actually try out things intentionally to see if that helps. And that helps me kind of stay engaged in a different way than taking things personally. I appreciated a lot of what Shannon shared about the challenges in dealing with folks. So yeah, okay. I'm not sure what that next one is. I'm gonna. Oh, team building. That's you. Okay, you're good.
All right, so examples how to connect better with well drillers, especially for folks who are not inspectors. The one thing to know is that basically every state has got an annual well drillers convention. And so finding out when that is, if you wanted to engage, call their association director, talk to them, let them know that they're interested in being part of the convention, would like to get to know some people. You'll find that once you've got in the door and got to know even one person, you'll then know 10 people, and then you'll know everybody. And so really it's that ice-breaking moment of where can we go. And so I can tell you where the barrel is with all the fish, and that's once a year they're going to do a continuing education event, and they're going to have 60 to 70% of their industry from the state in that one place at one time. So that's a good spot to start making some of those connections.
Oh dear. They are okay. The mice are not okay, but the people are okay. Actually, she ended up writing one of the most poignant thank you letters ever about our program. That was anonymous, of course. It's signed like KM at the bottom. But it was just such a very tangible, illustrative example of how people could really have no idea of what's going on. And then, it became this very graphic example of what could be happening if your well is not properly constructed and maintained. So.
To that end, when I saw that picture, it is the one thing I can tell you that 9 out of 10 bacteria fails that we get out of wells are because of poor well cap condition. Yeah, it's it. I mean, if we just once a year had everybody go look at their well cap, see if it's still intact, and fix it if it didn't, you would probably reduce bacteria in wells by 75, 80% right off the top. Not much effort. Non-inspectors, how to connect better with well drillers, especially folks who are not inspectors. I think we just answered that one, right?
Yeah, I was going to say field days too is another
The
one.
field days, that's the other thing. People really don't, that's a good suggestion, because really the state associations are always looking for ways for people to engage with the well drilling community. So if you wanted to organize a field day, you would find their state association will pull it together in a heartbeat. There are a lot of ways to do that, and engaging through the state association is probably your single easiest point of contact without trying to chase around people that are constantly everywhere else in any given day. And how can we get there from here? It starts with one. You find people like Ben Minden. I mean, Ben, you can tell he's been in the industry for 2 years, but you can tell he's the kind of person, if you're in Montana, you probably want to know Ben, right? And from Ben, you'll meet some other people, and you'll get into that wider network and understand them better. And the thing that's really interesting about well drillers is that I can go pretty much anywhere in this country and be one of the crowd in about 2 seconds, because we all face a lot of the same challenges. So once you start understanding well contractors, you understand about all well contractors, and it makes it pretty easy once you figure out 1 to figure out 2 to figure out 10. And once you figure that part out, making the relationships, seriously, I am going to cry in June when Doug retires. I mean, I've been working with him since I was 17 or 18 years old. And so you talk about just lifetime relationships you can make with people in this industry. And it's just, it's incredible bonds you can build with people. And it's really meaningful work that we're doing. When we work together to get it accomplished, we can do it really, really well. I'm sorry, it's just not. There is private wells are already the most affordable water supply system on the face of the planet. You're not going to find a more cost-effective way to deliver people water. So the expense is the expense, and the equipment's getting more expensive, the people are getting more expensive, the materials are getting more expensive. So I don't know that prohibitive is a 100-mile long water pipeline to serve that one person. That's cost prohibitive. the water supply costs are what they are, and they're going to go up, and they're going to go up rapidly. So even looking at Burgerson Caswell, pre-pandemic, entry-level positions were starting at $18 an hour. Now it's $25 an hour for someone with zero experience and potentially someone who's just going to, not show up a week later. And so the costs are going up at that rate, at that scale. And so that's going to really make it challenging. And that's why it's really important, as we heard from the MDH, them look, and some other folks that have looked at, how do we help the affordability aspect? Because we do need to have clean water supplies, right? It's really important to health of society that we do. So it's going to be a challenge over time, particularly for folks that do have limited incomes but need fresh water.
We saw something in Virginia that there was additional regulations coming through because of, that RFK said something about it, so. Well.
Of course, those do exist, but it's all about proper groundwater management. In my time on the NGWA board, when California was going through its drought cycles, and all the wells were getting deepened, and people kept on drawing water out of the aquifer, and you'd see some people that were fairly proud. It's like, wow, we got a lot of work to do, and I'm like, yeah, but what about all the negative effects from continuing to just pump all that groundwater? And now here we are, 10 years later, and there's permanent subsidence, collapsed aquifers, and everything else. So it's taking care of groundwater from a quantity standpoint is really important. Managed aquifer recharge, ASR. I'm in Minnesota. I see a lot of farmers tile fields, which go to creeks, which go to rivers, which go to Iowa and then Louisiana. We need to be a lot smarter about what we do with the water that functionally recharges aquifers.
Thank you.
All right, thank y'all. So last but not least, our final talks. We have Tales from the Private Well Help Center, Sally Dolan, Illinois State Water Survey. Extending Your Reach, Using Brochures to Amplify Your Message, Katie Buckley, Illinois State Water Survey. And Tap Talk, the Drinking Water in Rural America podcast, Steve Wilson.
Okay, first off, I forgot to put any introductions in my slides, so I'm Sally Dolan, and my main role with the private well class is to, no, I'm doing it before it starts. But I answer hotline calls, and as Aaron said, it's very difficult. Sometimes I say there's a gray line between whether I need to refer them to a therapist or a well professional. So if I've ever crossed the line the wrong way and sent you a caller that I needed to go the other way, I apologize. Cindy, I'm looking at you. But Hideyuki, I think I'm ready to go. Greetings, my well water warriors. I bid you welcome to another chilling chapter of Tales from the Private Well Help Center. Before we descend into the murky depths of hotline horrors, I must raise a bony goblet to my terrifyingly talented team. They've stitched this conference together with sweat, caffeine, and questionable snacks. And especially Steve and Katie. Without them, this conference wouldn't be up to, well, code. It begins with what we cannot see: arsenic, PFAS, the silent hitchhikers of geology and chemistry past. No taste, no smell, no warning. How do we know it's there? Testing, yes, testing. Because the only way we know what's in the water is if we test it. Not guess, not assume, test it. And sometimes it's not just unseen, it's alive. bacteria, E. coli, Yersinia, and a whole cast of microscopic troublemakers. When people call us, it's not curiosity, it's concern. We connect them with testing, treatment, and support. Because when something's living in your water, you want answers fast. But sometimes it gets a little more, not really sure how to put this, personal. One caller had a rash, itchy, relentless, suspicious. The cause? Hard water. But the twist, he had a genetic disposition that made it worse. So what might be minor for most people, for him was something entirely different. His water wasn't just inconvenient, it was launching a targeted attack on his skin. And sometimes these stories get a little strange. A well owner called us. The driller dropped his phone in the well. Plunk, gone. The well owner asked, "Will you retrieve it?" The driller said, "Absolutely not." Somewhere down there, that phone is still ringing, echoing, vibrating in the darkness, waiting for someone brave enough to pick it up. But not all of our stories stay local. One day, we helped connect a nonprofit in Texas connect with a farmer in Tanzania, because apparently, even groundwater networking has gone global. This farmer needed access to safe water, and with a few emails and a dash of hotline magic, we were able to help get the process started. From local calls to crossing continents, our reach is really growing. And sometimes it inspires something even bigger than that. A retired doctor tested her well and found contamination. Now, for most people, that's where the story would have ended. Test, get results, deal with it quietly, and move on. But not this time, because she didn't want to stop there. She pushes forward, wanting to educate, organize, and help others. Because once you understand the risk, you can't unsee it, and you don't want others to miss it either. And while we're still working with her, supporting, connecting, and helping the momentum grow, here's a call to action for anyone working with Western Kentucky. If you've ever wanted to make a difference, this is where it starts. And so our tale ends, not in fear, but in purpose, because every call, big or small, is someone trying to understand their water and protect their health. Some calls are simple, some calls are strange, and some calls we really wish weren't real. But every single one matters to the person on the other end of the line. But we don't face these stories alone. We work alongside health departments, extension programs, state agencies, and of course, our fearless RCAP private well leads. You are the ones answering the questions. You are the ones solving the problems. And occasionally you're opening emails that just say, "My water smells weird. Can you help?" So to all of you, thank you. Thank you for being a part of our story. And until next time, test your water or risk discovering what's plotting in the water this whole time, and keep the horrors right where they belong. Mwah! Goodbye!
Yeah, that was a whole theatrical experience. Oh my goodness. Okay, I am ready, Dookie. Okay, hello everybody. My name is Katie Buckley. A lot of you know me from helping plan and organize the conference. I'm a water resources outreach specialist at the Illinois State Water Survey. And today I'm going to be talking about how to extend your reach, specifically using brochures to amplify your message. We all know the background on who we're working with here. Private well owners come from all shapes and sizes, all the sorts of demographics. They can be wealthy, non-wealthy, educated. They can be all different ages, but there's not a one-size-fits-all solution for reaching these well owners. So when it comes to advertising, we have to think about who we are trying to reach. A lot of elderly well owners perhaps don't use the internet or are not tech savvy, whereas younger folks perhaps are very much on social media. So when we talk about brochures, which is what we're going to be focusing on today, it's easy to hand a brochure to an individual, a well owner that is in searching for information, but we need to figure out how to amplify this message. How do we reach more people than what we can reach at a singular event? So very much not unlike a multi-level marketing program or a pyramid scheme, we are functioning as the distributor here with our brochures that we offer. And we are disseminating them out to professionals who then send them out to private well owners. This is our brochure. Many of you have seen this before. This is a tri-fold brochure. We offer them for free to health professionals, sanitarians, county health departments. It has our program partners. This is the inside of our brochure. We really tried to pare down the 3 basic things we want well owners to do, which is get their water tested, also following best management practices, and learning how their well works, which is them finding our class. On the front of the brochure here, so to speak, there is a yellow outline of a box. That's really so that the local state agencies, organizations, programs can get their information out by either stapling a business card or putting on a sticker and affixing that so that the well owner has a direct contact. Over the course of the years, we've done several updates to our brochures, and that has been a challenge. This particular update, we've added a QR code, and we've adjusted for our help center and hotline phone number. We also offer our brochures in the Spanish version. That's the most challenging because we are not native Spanish speakers, and we want to make sure we get the language correct. And so we've had to have native Spanish speakers help us with our translation. So how do we solicit to distribute our brochures to the professionals that then distribute them to the well owners? Well, we send an email, a news blast in our newsletter, and we also have a sign-up form. So you can find that actually at our booth if you're interested in ordering some brochures. So we have been doing this for several years now, and we've distributed over 63,000 English brochures, 12,800 Spanish brochures via mail, and 13,500 at other various events, totaling over 90,000 brochures so far to date. This is everybody's favorite day of the year. This is our brochure boxing party, and so this is when our team gets together and spends several hours boxing up our brochures to send out to all of our local partners across the nation. And so this is what it looks like. We've had over 528 different programs, partners, organizations request brochures. And so this is one of the larger mailings that we've done. As you can see, it's quite an undertaking. This is just a small subset of the boxes that we've distributed. So over the years, we've had quite a blitz in the beginning of our brochure distributing. So we've had over 30,000 at the initial mailing, and then it has decreased since then, and we average about 3,000 to 7,000 brochure mailings, and we do that once a year. For the events that are not necessarily the brochure mailings, we distribute them also on our own. And this is a Farm Progress Show. You can see the brochures making a little debut here in the corner. The Farm Progress Show targets a more rural population. We get a lot of farmers and Spanish speakers there as well. We also distribute them at the state fair. And you can see the brochures on the table there. And we get a lot of rural well owners coming in through, and they're interested in our brochures here as well. But the real bread and butter is getting the county health departments, the programs, extension, state organizations, laboratories to distribute our brochures. So we like to see them, county health departments, because that is where they're going to be reaching well owners that are calling for information and for help. One of the other things we've just invented was our new magnets. You guys have all received one of those in your koozie. This was a suggestion that we've now are piloting, and so it has our help center phone number. You can stick that right on your fridge, and then that way you can have access to the hotline phone number, our privatewellclass.org website, and our email address. Here's my contact information. Please sign up if you want to receive brochures. We'll get those mailed out to you, and thank you all so much for coming to the conference this year.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad I didn't follow Sally. She did a great job. I would have been intimidated, so go ahead. So I'm going to talk about Tap Talk. It's a podcast that we started in 2021. Jennifer Wilson and I are the hosts, and Laura Schultz does all the editing and stuff to make it all sound good. We interview people all over the country on a lot of different things. So there's 3 booths out there that are ours. We run 3 programs. So the idea behind our podcast is to connect all of those things. Wateroperator.org, if you're not familiar with it, we work with water and wastewater operators at small utilities nationwide. We started just 2 years ago, decentralizedwastewater.org. It's a very similar program. We list all the events in the country that pumpers can get, for instance, CEUs for, and we have a library that's all free information. And the idea is we're trying to provide those resources to help them move forward. And then our third program, the reason we're all here, is our private well class, which started in 2013, and we've had 14,000 people take our class, and it's just really grown. We started a help center 2 years ago, but in addition to that, we have a couple other things. One, we do have a Spanish language version of our class. We worked with RCAP folks from around the country that are native Spanish speakers, and we had a student here that did that. So that's available as a kind of a foresight. And then we were asked by EPA to create a version of our private well class for non-community water systems, and that's groundwater and well care. That led to a contract with Mass DEP. Now we've created a source water protection class and a cybersecurity class, and we're working on an operator math class. So Tap Talk, the Drinking Water in Rural America podcast, is at this URL, drinkingwaterpodcast.org. I guess as far as the numbers go here, we're on our 7th season. They're 12-episode seasons. I got ahead of myself. Never mind. This is what our webpage looks like today. Bob Schreiber helped start the National Groundwater Monitoring Network that the USGS runs. We've been a partner. I was part of the development of that network. So we interviewed him about that. And really, Tap Talk's meant to combine all of those sources. So whether you're a drinking water operator, you're a well owner, you're an environmental health professional, it's so that we all can understand what everybody else does and how they interrelate. And so we've really worked hard to build that. We've had 17,000 downloads so far, and it varies. You know, the biggest one has been the one we did for Operations Challenge for WEF. It's got over 1,200 downloads, I think. 11 folks here are part of our podcast, have already been guests. And here's why you should be interested and pay attention. We deal with issues that are important to all of us in the water industry, whether you're extension or you're a driller or you're a health professional. It's really about helping build cross-sectional, if you will, understanding. So as far as topics, they really vary on a lot of things, but we've done a lot of private well talks. I knew Wilson would love this picture. One of our first ones, I interviewed Wilson because they had a downhole camera, and it was this first state I know of that did that kind of work. So Aaron's here, Dave's here, Frida was mentioned earlier, and Dakota County, Minnesota has a lot of money, and they do a lot of testing, and it was really interesting. Same way on public health. We've interviewed a number of people. Eric's here, Alan was here earlier. Just trying to reach out to folks that are doing novel things or really interesting things that might be presentable to other parts of the country or topics you might not be aware of. Jackie talked about environmental justice the first time we interviewed her, and then we had her and Jennifer Redmond on after they did their big study with EPA. And mentioned Jeremy Fries is here from Cherokee Nation. He and Billy are part of our Trusted Tap project as well as other things. And it's a lot more than private wells and public health. It's also public water systems, public wastewater systems, and decentralized wastewater. These are just a few that we do there. We work. Tammy's a great story. I met her at an ASBA conference. She lived in a small village in Alaska and wanted to be the water operator, and they told her no because she was a woman. She eventually got the job because nobody else would take it. Now she's the DEP primacy agency lead. She decides who gets, she keeps people all the systems in compliance. I want to mention Michael Phyllis. He's an AP reporter. He wrote the big article that came out in February about PFAS. It was about Stella. He and I talk a lot, and so we had him on our podcast to talk about why professionals should actually work with him. Another one I wanted to highlight, I know Wilson mentioned that North Carolina's got the Be Well Informed tool. That's hosted by ECOS, and Kurt works at ECOS, and so we interviewed him about all the changes that are coming up. Right now, there's 12 states and 1 county that have access through that, And so really my message is, if you're into podcasts, you should look through it, 77 of them. There were a lot of great topics. If you're interested, pitch me a topic and we'll see what we can do about getting you on. So, thank you.
By far, the number one call we get is, where can I get my water tested? And so I appreciate a lot of the people in this room because you are the ones that I typically send them to. So if your state has a testing program of any sort, we try and send them to you first to have you assist them. And then our second most asked question is funding, and we all know where that's at. What strategies do you use to keep cool during stressful calls? After the call, Sarah and I get together and we talk about it. A lot of times you just have to let them talk. We've had everything from very tearful to angry calls. Our phone number is listed on the EPA's website. And so they call us up and say, do you work for the EPA? And I say no. And then depending on the call, either you use that in your advantage of, hey, I don't work for the EPA, so I can help you. Or you get it both ways. So I've had one person yell at me and hang up. I had one person curse at me, and Steve helped me keep my cool by saying, I'll handle it from here. But you get them at their worst, you get them at their best. And you just have to roll with it and let them have their chance to speak. Sometimes they yell, sometimes they cry, and you just try to glean the information you can help with. And we're fortunate that we're able to send them to other resources. So whether it's, hey, call 211 in your state, they have mental health services, they have legal services, they may be able to help you better than me. That's the way that you go with it.
Sometimes they're not honest.
Oh, yeah, and sometimes they are not honest. We've had
It's a pain.
it go circle, so I had a caller from Minnesota call me and say, the local health department is not working with me. They're telling me I can't put my well in. There's no reason I can't put the well in. So we contact Minnesota Department of Health, who connects us with the sanitarian who's working with it. Well, or I guess he wanted to open a candy store, and they said his well couldn't be used for the candy store. And so we go full circle, we get to the sanitarian, and he said, the well is in the building, it's 9 feet from the septic system, and I have been trying to work with this guy for over 6 months, and he won't work with me. So when I call him and say, hey, I talked to X at X County, oh, you talked to him? And, then he knew that he wasn't going to get anywhere. Hopefully y'all heard me.
Is this one on? This one's on. Okay. Oh, everyone can hear me now. How often do we make updates to the brochures? It's been whenever it warrants an update. So we've changed the number of million of household wells that we thought existed in America. That was one of the updates. And then we updated it to add the QR code and also for our hotline and help center. So we've done about 2 updates since the original creation of the brochure. So it's about biannually.
And we really tried to have those ready for this, but we had trouble getting the Spanish version ready, and we didn't want to send it to the printer just for the English ones. So we'll have them in a few weeks. All right? Yeah. Sarah's in the back. Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you.